everybody, I'm Katie here with MEPAKAN. Today we are doing a stream called Talking with My Black Friend with our friend Gavin Pinchback, who's been a long-time attendee, GM, and volunteer for MEPAKAN. And I just wanted to kind of let you all know how this came about. MEPAKAN has long been a very welcoming space for everybody, and we as a directing team and as a staff, we have always wanted everyone to feel welcome and appreciated for their differences, as well as the fact that we obviously are all gamers. And it kind of came to our attention about a year ago that maybe everybody didn't know that this was a safe space, that we could have everybody and have everyone feel welcome. And so we started to think about how we could communicate that out to the gaming community to say, hey, we don't care who you love. We don't care what the color of your skin is. You are welcome, accepted, and appreciated at MEPAKAN. And so when Gavin had this idea to say, hey, let's have an open conversation, we jumped right on that and said, we want to talk. We want to, say loud and clear that we love everybody and we want you to feel welcome. And so Gavin is a great friend of ours, and we're really glad to be able to talk to him today. So just to start us off, Gavin, could you just tell us a little bit about your background and what your perspectives are coming into this conversation?
Yeah, thanks. Glad to be here today. And yes, a longtime MEPAKAN family member is my MEPAKAN t-shirt from 13 years ago. Longtime gamer. I began gaming in approximately 1981. My first Dungeons & Dragons game was actually at school, where my English teacher thought it would be good for a couple of us to boost our creativity and learn about mythology, and allowed one of my friends to set up a game on every other Friday. And I've been hooked ever since as a gamer, supported by both my mom and my dad, who are not gamers, but very supportive of what I do. I've been coming to MEPAKAN for a long time, and while gaming is not my profession, I am a board member for the Badana group, which is a group that looks at how do we use gaming in order to address mental health problems. And I'm really proud of the work that we do there. We've been a guest of MEPAKAN before, and just love the partnership with MEPAKAN. In my real life, I'm not a member of any kind of organized group about race or gender issues. I work in a legal department for a major telecom, and am currently a PhD candidate in industrial and organizational psychology, not at all in race issues or sociology or anything like that, but it is an interest of mine, particularly going to conventions and gaming and seeing what we're dealing with as a country right now is kind of this renewed awareness of how we represent folks from all different cultures, backgrounds, gender identifications, all of those kind of things, and how we represent those in the hobby that we love, which is gaming.
That's great. So what has your experience been specifically talking about race in the gaming community?
Yeah, I was just talking about that with somebody the other day, and I said I started playing in 1981. I was 11 years old. I did not meet another Black gamer until I was in college, probably my third year in college. So I was, how old then? 20 years old, before I met a Black gamer.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just not as prevalent, I think. Particularly in those days, it wasn't as prevalent for there to be gamers of color, and actually the female gamers as well. There just weren't as many of them back in the early 1990s.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was not born in 1981. In fact, my parents hadn't even met yet. So,
Oh no.
so
I guess I
I'm
just aged myself. Sorry.
the opposite
Yeah, you and
end
me
of the
both.
spectrum.
Yeah.
No,
My
you're not the
first-
only one, Gavin.
I know, I'm the baby. My first RPG was Dungeons and Dragons run by a woman. And so like I had kind of the opposite, that I was always surrounded by women, and Trish and I have been playing Pathfinder together for 5 years. So I have often had a lot of women, but when it comes to people of color, you're right. I haven't had that many in my gaming group, and certainly not because I'm exclusive or wouldn't welcome them, but just haven't had that opportunity. So it's going to be interesting to see as the generations go. Not that I'm that much younger than you, but even Gavin and I talked the other day. I'm super excited because my stepdaughter and Gavin's son have started playing together, and they're doing, I don't know, D&D, I guess. But I was just excited to see that she found another group of people to play with who were just cool people. She's just happy to have them, and it just happens that one of them is Black, and that's great to have that diversity in that group.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, it's you mentioned, Katie, that MEPAKAN is such a welcoming family of gamers, and I certainly have felt that. I have met a lot of really great folks and feel very close to a lot of people within that MEPAKAN family. But if we look around, there isn't a lot of representation in even MEPAKAN, as welcoming as it is. Yeah. And it's not exclusive at all. It's just that maybe it's an awareness amongst Black gamers or Asian gamers or Hispanic gamers that we're out here, and that we do welcome everyone to come and play at our tables.
Yeah, and that's something I think that is important to, and I kind of mentioned it at the beginning, that we want to get the word out there. How do we get the word out to let people know, hey, this is a safe space and we welcome you? And that's, I guess, one of the questions that we have is where are the people of color who are gaming that we can become friends with them and welcome them into our family? I don't know if there's an easy answer, but
yeah, I don't know that there is an easy answer. In my work with Bodhana, we kind of face the same thing. We hold a convention in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is a town that's approximately 30% Black, and has a significant Hispanic representation in that community. And yet there is virtually no one from either the Hispanic or Black communities that attends that event. And so how do we do this? And I think part of it is that I think there's two things. One is that awareness, that lack of awareness that this is a hobby or a lifestyle that is open to everybody. And just getting that message out that it's okay. There is a certain, I think, stigma around some gaming. I mean, a lot of people have an image of us as gamers that we're a certain way, right? And I don't know if any of us are in our basement, in our mom's basement right now. So I don't think that's really true. But yeah, but that's kind of the stereotype, right?
Yeah.
And so getting past that stereotype or that stigma that's associated with gaming because of some of the things that have happened in the past is going to take good messaging and really going in and specifically targeting folks that might be of color, and trying to bring them into the fold. I think there are some natural ways to get there, but it's really going to take some effort. And the other thing I think is representation in the products that we have.
Right.
If you think of, like, for instance, Dungeons and Dragons, for through 4 editions of D&D, which is over 38 years and more than 1,600 pages of core rule books, there is only one non non-Caucasian male and one non-Caucasian female human in
Wow.
all of that literature. And so not seeing someone who looks like them, right, a young Asian child or Hispanic child um, or a black child might not naturally gravitate to this game that could really be a lot of fun,
Yeah.
but they don't see themselves in it, and so they don't get there.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious to know your perspective. We just were talking Pathfinder in our previous stream, and we didn't really address it specifically, but second edition just came out about a year ago. And when they came out with second edition, they changed the term from race to ancestry. Do you think that that was something that was like an important step that they did when they made that change?
Yeah, actually, I do. I'm not a member of the cancel culture crowd, I guess, but I do think that it's important. Uh, I've always kind of struggled with the idea of race, because the race as we actually portray it is a social construct. It's not really a biological construct.
Right.
If you're a member of the human race, your DNA is so closely aligned with each other. We can mate with each other. We can interchange organs with each other through transplant. We're all the same race, but we do have different ethnicities. We have different uh, heritages. We might have different content of melanin in our skin, but
Yeah.
we're really all the same race. So that
Yes.
concept of race has really always kind of been a little bit difficult for me.
Yeah, and that's something we talk about in our family because my family's background is British and my husband's is Italian. And so they're completely different backgrounds, but our skin is basically the same color. And so when we talk about race with our kids, that's something that we talk about, that it's like we're all different. We're all unique in different ways, and I think that's a great thing. And why the world, the society has decided that there's a difference based on the amount of melanin in your skin is just ludicrous. But I think what is important, and I say this to my students as a middle school teacher, is that your experience is going to be different. Your experience of the world, of our society, is different than mine just because of your skin color. And as much as I can disagree with it, it's fact that that's a different experience. And as someone who's obviously white, I need to know what is your experience so that I can be sensitive to that and understand that in different ways. And that's a very open conversation that I have with my students and with my kids at home. And that's really what we're here, talking about now is what's your experience and what can we do to understand that better. And so that's going to bring me, one of my next questions is, how do you think your experience in gaming is different just because you're black as opposed to white?
That's a great question. Um, I think that for many people of color, one is again seeing themselves in some of the material. For instance, even as simply as playing an elf, for instance, um, there's a perception that other than the drow,
Yeah.
there are no black elves, right? There are no brown skinned elves. They're all white. And then, I know I've encountered before, um, kind of funny looks or even comments about, wait, you're playing an elf? Well, what color's his skin? Is he white? And yeah, I think that really changes how you look at the game if you don't think that some of those options are available to you. And certainly in convention play, whether it's organized convention like Adventurers League or something like that, or if it's more pickup game like a lot of the gaming that I do at MEPAKAN. Um, I think their player perceptions of of both the characters that someone of color plays, as well as of the player themselves, right? Um, I can't say that I've faced a whole lot of harassment or discrimination of, oh, I'm not going to play with you. But I think that you do have to get over kind of, particularly when you're playing groups that people don't know who you are, of getting over that kind of surprise that, oh, wait, you're playing this game? Um, and I think that impacts people.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, and I think one of the great things about RPGs and LARPs in general is that it gives you a chance to step outside of yourself and to play something that isn't who you are. For example, we have a friend who's like 6'4", really just a big guy, and he's playing a gnome. And I'm looking at my husband, and this tiny, we call him our pocket healer, literally, because he's real tiny, and nobody bats an eye that, oh well, here's this big guy playing a tiny woman. No problem. No one even thinks twice. What's
yeah,
that?
Rat folk. So.
Rat folk. That's right.
yeah, rat folk.
Gavin,
Yeah.
Gavin, have you seen that video, The Look, that Procter and Gamble put out?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, you ought to take a look at it. A colleague of mine shared it, we were having a virtual vigil, and he shared it. I had seen it prior, but it goes through, I don't want to, there's kind of a reveal at the end, so I don't want to give it up for the audience, but it's very interesting that it's following a Black man kind of just going through his day.
Oh, interesting.
And there's the reaction that people have to various things that he's doing. That was enlightening to me when I'm watching it, because it's like, I could possibly be the person giving the look, but I'm not the person getting the look.
Right. Yeah.
And
yeah,
Katie was talking about like the background, British background, Italian, and we're doing a book club around the book White Fragility. And one of the first questions was, when did you, or how as you were growing up, how did you react to yourself as a certain race? And as a white person who grew up in a almost exclusively white area, I had to say, honestly, I never even thought of myself as white. Like, I thought of myself as part Norwegian, part this, part Irish, part British, part German or something. Because there was a lot of talk about, Joe is Polish and Susie is Italian, and so, whatever. But it really hit me when I was reading that, like, I never had to think about that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, oh, absolutely. And I think for, at least for many African Americans that I've talked to, including myself, you're kind of lumped all together, right? You're African American. If you're white, yes, you might be from an Italian background, or English background, or something like that, or Polish or whatever. But if you're African American or Black, you're just African, right? And Africa is not a country. Africa is a continent, and it has so many different cultures in it. But it's, and partly it's because for a lot of Black Americans, we don't have a connection because we were taken out of that. Our ancestors were taken out of the heritage, and that heritage was discouraged from being passed on. And so we were so lost from that. There is no origin country. You can't say, yes, I'm proud to be, I don't know, from the Congo or something like that. Nobody says that because you just don't know. And I think that does make it a little bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I think back, and this is as a parent now, how starkly different raising my child is versus others. When I was a kid, my two best friends were Pakistani and Puerto Rican. And my mom at one point had to explain racism to me when I was about my daughter's age because I didn't get it. And I'm like, but my friends are cool. What's wrong with my friends? And she's like, nothing is wrong with your friends. But there are people who don't think that because of the color of their skin. And I was blown away. It made no sense to me. And now my father married a black man. And so we have had a lot of really interesting conversations about race, you know, around the Thanksgiving dinner table. But I think it's great for my daughter to see that and to understand that. But it really has hit home with the Black Lives Matter movement and hearing stories of parents who have kids same as I do. And, you know, where I'm worried about, okay, well, you know, make sure that you don't, you know, lose your switch when you go to your friend's house. The conversations that other families have to have with their 9-year-olds about, you know, do this or don't do that or don't say this or that because it could result in really insane situations. That really, as a parent, hits home to me as how different my experience with the world has been. And so how do you feel, Gavin? The big thing that we hear in society right now is Black Lives Matter is obviously the big movement. And so often people will respond with, well, but all lives matter. I can tell you 100% that nobody on this video would say that. I can tell you that for sure. But what does that make you feel when people do say that or you hear someone say that?
Well, I mean, I don't. Okay, this is a tricky thing to say because it's not a simple answer.
Well, we'll all take it in the best light possible.
Okay, all right. I don't want to be Terry Crews when I say this and have folks be too upset, but I don't think anybody questions that that everyone believes that all lives matter, right? I don't think that there's no one that I know. Well, I shouldn't say that. No one that I normally associate with believes that any life is any more valuable or less valuable than any other. Actually, I'm a really big adherent of the Ethical Warrior, which is the book by Jack Hoban. And in it, he talks about dual life value, that everybody's life is equally worth the same. And so on its face, all lives matters. Like, oh yeah, I agree with that. Every life matters. But the reason for the Black Lives Matter movement so it's really hard to it's a hard thing to really confront because I think a lot of people who say all lives matter are not trying to appear racist or anything, but they think like our president has said that Black Lives Matter is a terrorist statement, for instance. And to me, I wonder why those same people that might say all lives matter don't think that saying blue lives matter is a problem. And fair, uh, you know, I have to say that I come from a law enforcement background. I come from a law enforcement family, so blue lives do matter to me, but they're equal in value. And so there is that parable in the Bible that talks about the lost sheep. And if you have a shepherd who has 100 sheep and one goes missing, it's not that those 99 sheep are worth anything less, but you take the time and effort to go and pay attention to what happened to that one sheep to bring it back into the fold. And that, for that moment, that sheep's life matters. It's not more, it's just that that's where your focus and your attention is.
Right.
And that's what Black Lives is trying to do, is to say that we need to take a stand to make sure that Black lives are equally of value, and therefore we can bring it back into the fold, and then we can truly get to a place where all lives matter. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to me. And one of the analogies that I've seen that I really liked was talking about the fact that when we're talking about blue lives, you know, they can take that uniform off and they can say, hey, I'm just not going to be a police officer right this minute. You don't have that option when we're talking about the color of your skin. You know, you are always going to be Black. That's just the way it is. And so, you know, looking at that as one of the big differences when we talk about that, I think is really important.
Yeah. And, I think in thinking specifically of Blue Lives Matter, and not to anger any of my colleagues or folks that I have as friends, but I think one of the big differences with, I see these postings and it's like, oh my gosh, this police officer was killed, and nobody marches for that police officer. And I think it's tragic, and we have to create a society where it's not okay to kill police officers. They are our guardians in our community, and they do an incredibly tough job, and most of them do an incredibly good job. I know a lot of good police officers. But on the other hand, if a police officer is killed, everything stops. Everything stops to find that perpetrator.
Yep.
I've been involved in a number of investigations through my work, and I can tell you that as soon as a police officer is harmed, it is a number one priority for the police department, for the emergency personnel, for the other folks that are associated with the criminal justice system. It is a huge priority to find out who that killer was and bring them to justice.
Right.
And so there doesn't need to be a protest to try to bring somebody to justice, because they are oftentimes instantly brought to justice. And actually, if you kill a police officer, oftentimes you're actually killed as a result. You don't even go to trial. But that perpetrator is automatically dealt with.
Yeah.
The difference is that for an African American or Black American who's not a police officer, is that there are a lot of crimes that go unresolved. And then on top of that, that for Black Americans, there is a disproportionate number of Black Americans who are killed by the police that would be doing the investigation anyway. And those
Right.
police might not act in accordance with the law, but there's no kind of way to bring them to justice. That the great majority of police officers who are brought up on charges, well, first of all, aren't brought up on charges, not officially. And if they are brought up on charges, it's amazingly difficult to actually prosecute and convict a law enforcement officer, regardless of what those actions were that he or she took. And that's why there's a protest for someone killing an unarmed Black man who was killed by the police, and the police do nothing about it. There's a protest to try to bring justice, but there doesn't have to be a protest to bring anybody to justice for the person who killed a police officer, because they've already been brought to justice.
Yeah.
And isn't
I think that's a really great point.
That there are usually greater penalties if you've done harm to a police officer, law enforcement, right? And law enforcement has qualified immunity, assuming it's just I've listened to some stories about I follow the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's podcast about miscarriages of justice, which many times happen to be Black people that the justice was miscarried against them. And it's just it's fascinating in a very negative way to me. Like, well, if it was me or you and we did this, forget it. You'd be in jail. It's not even a question. But And I understand why, if a police officer shoots someone during during their duty, we don't want them thrown in jail, willy-nilly, because maybe they didn't have another choice.
Right.
But we've kind of crossed the Rubicon in many, many, many of these scenarios that, it seems pretty clear that why did you not stop? Like,
yeah, I think there's a lot about the system, not the individuals too. We're not talking about individual cops. We're talking about the way the system has been designed or set up at this point. I can't hear Gavin.
Accidentally double muted myself.
That was
So,
Gavin.
so way back in the ancient ages, when I was a third-year law student, I worked for a law firm, and it was a plaintiff's firm. And one of the cases that we had actually went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. So you could do a search for me, and you'll find that third-year law student helped write a brief. But it was actually about qualified immunity. And so I'm not saying that qualified immunity is the wrong doctrine to have to apply to a lot of these cases. However, there needs to be reform of qualified immunity because of how we interpret what it is. Essentially, the way the courts have grown to interpret qualified immunity now is that unless there's a specific situation that has been adjudicated by the courts and therefore been adopted into policy, it becomes incredibly hard, even if the behavior seems outrageous, to hold a police officer accountable. In the case that I was involved in, that was dismissed based upon qualified immunity, it was a person, and admittedly, that person, I don't know if he's actually even still alive. He did live through the encounter. He was a person who was involved in crime, and he was stopped one night when he was not participating in crime. He was known to the police department, and he was placed into the back of a patrol car. Like I said, he was known to the police department, and there is a police officer who had a history of complaints against him for violent actions against perpetrators or suspects. And so the details are a little bit sketchy, but that police officer went into the back of the police car with him, and then somehow the person was shot in the head. Right? Not the police officer, the other person. He lived. He was paralyzed, but he did live. What they claimed, and this is before there's a lot of cameras or anything in cars or police officers, what they claimed is that he was handcuffed and put into the back of the police car, somehow worked his way out of the handcuffs, grabbed a keychain that was in his pocket, and then proceeded to attack the officer in the front seat of the police car. So this was a standard police car sedan. If you've ever been into the back of a sedan, you could probably realize it's a little bit difficult, and especially when you're a 5'8", I don't know how much you weighed, 165-pound person, and also sitting in the back of the police car is a 6'3", 200-pound police officer who played college football. He's very, very big. And also you're handcuffed. How it's possible for you to grab a keychain from your back pocket and then attack the officer in the front seat, necessitating you to be shot in the head by the person in the back seat with you, is a little bit questionable. But it was dismissed because of qualified immunity. It was said that, you know what, the police officer's story is given a greater weight than this person who has a record. And therefore, if both police officers concur, we have to assume that what they did was reasonable and that they felt in fear of their lives, and therefore they could shoot him. yeah, I mean, qualified immunity is a really kind of weird protection that we have, and I think it does need to be reformed.
Yeah. And I think that's where, bringing it back to the gaming convention circuit, that when we're talking about systems that are stacked against people of color or whatever the discrimination is, what do you think we can do as a gaming convention staff to help people feel more included and welcome?
Yeah. I think also maybe looking at different audiences for attracting new attendees. For instance, one of the things that we're doing with Bodhana is looking at how do we encourage, make the connection with some of the other things that might have better representation of Black, Hispanic, and Asian uh, people in them. So for instance, we are looking at outreach to the anime community,
Okay.
to try to say, hey, look, you know what? You don't have to play Dungeons and Dragons. There's a whole bunch of games that you might like that are based on anime. Um, but also trying to do kind of targeted advertising to folks that aren't going to get the traditional message about our convention, right? Trying to find ways that we can say, hey, look, MEPAKAN is going on and this is what it is. And we offer these kind of basic kind of ways to get uh, into gaming and just be a part of our family.
How have you seen the gaming community react to women overall, particularly women of color?
Yeah, it's been a mixed bag. Um, everybody's familiar with Gamersgate and Gamersgate 2, and because we didn't learn our lesson in Gamersgate. But I think, and we still see it. I know I have friends who are female gamers who have had to deal with really horrible behavior by male gamers, and other male gamers don't do anything about it. They don't say, and I'm probably guilty of that too, is that they don't stop the game and say, hey, look, this is not okay, and you can't play at my table if you're not respectful of everybody. um, I think using systems for GMs and gaming conventions that encourage things like using lines and veils in games so that you know what is appropriate at your table. Doing things like what MEPAKAN does now is it allows you to use your pronouns, the right
Yes.
pronouns for you. Encouraging to folks who run gaming conventions like MEPAKAN does is really have a lot of involvement from the staff and the directors and the volunteers who are actually looking at how people are treating each other on the game floor. I think that's really important. And then calling that out when they see that it's not okay. One of the other things that we're doing with Bodhana is we've created an actual code of conduct, and most conventions have a code of conduct.
Yep,
But
we do.
we've created a really, and yes, we have one at MEPAKAN. Actually, in creating the Bodhana one, I actually looked at the MEPAKAN code of conduct, so thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
But actually having ours is and it hasn't been fully revealed yet on our site, but we've voted on it as a board. It's really detailed on what the behaviors are that we expect and the behaviors that are prohibited in dealing with us. And it doesn't just address discrimination, but that's a flow through the entirety of the document, is that it's all about respecting other people.
Yes.
So making it very clear.
So when we talk about not being racist versus being anti-racist, what do you see, or how would you describe the differences between those two things?
Yeah. I had a really great opportunity to hear um, Ibram X. Kendi, the professor who wrote How to Be an Anti-Racist, through my work. I had an occasion to listen to him. And really, I think the difference is action. That being a non-racist is just not exhibiting racist behavior. But what we want to be is an anti-racist, which is actually actively seeking out the issues, confronting the issues, and making sure that we are not um, exhibiting racist behavior. And to some extent, we all have biases. We all have these biases that are ingrained in us from the time that we are born. Um, but we can take affirmative action of seeking out ways to stamp out racist behavior, to seek understanding between people and all the differences that we might see in our community, and taking action to be inclusive of folks that are different in perspective than we are.
Thank you. So my last question is, to enjoy a game in a public space like MEPAKAN, what needs to happen? What do you need to be able to enjoy that?
Oh boy, that's a really big question. I'm pretty easy personally, but I think that some people just really need um, they need the culture to be supportive of being different. And that's one of the great things about MEPAKAN. If people get to come to MEPAKAN, they'll find that we're very, very supportive of you. If you're respectful to other people, we are extremely respectful of you and all the differences that you might have, whether they be based on uh, the region of the country or your particular preference in, I don't know, the color blue. It doesn't really matter. We're very receptive of difference, and we really like it. I mean, look at our um, look at our cosplay, and you'll see
Oh,
that
yeah.
there's a lot of different people. Um, that's really cool. So I think that we have to just keep encouraging that openness to all of us, and then also actively, as leaders within the space, actively confront if we see things that are not quite right, and not just ignore it or hope it goes away or hope it resolves itself or avoid it. We need to really actively say, okay, let's take a stand here and do something about this. And seeing that over time will cause people to be more comfortable, and exhibiting those behaviors of being respectful and inclusive will be contagious, kind of.
Thank you so much, Gavin. I want to give a shout out to Trish because most of the questions I asked came from her. She helped me come up with those, even though I'm the one who tends to
run
our
a book group,
streams.
So.
Well, thank you. It was very much appreciated. And Gavin, really, truly, thank you so much for talking with us and being open. And sometimes it's difficult. But it's definitely worth having the conversation and being open to it. Is there anything else you want to add, or does anyone else have any questions before we wrap up?
I think I do have a question, and this is for everybody, not just Gavin. I think I think of this as when I was like the only woman at the table, right? There's always a person, sadly, it's almost always a guy, who we say, oh, that's just the way so-and-so is, with whatever their antisocial behavior might be. Many times it is racist, or sexist. How can we be better about not just saying, oh, that's the way Karen is, and actually calling her out kindly? Because I don't think it does any good for me to be like, you are such a blah. I don't think that helps.
Yeah, I agree
on that one.
It's a great question.
Yeah,
it's a hard one.
Yeah,
I have been the very bad over, and we've talked about our kids, like my daughter is a teenager now. Many times I have said to her, oh, that's just the way so-and-so is. So-and-so teases you. So-and-so says this.
Well, I think part of that too is it's so difficult to fight the inertia of the room. Everyone else is just letting it slide, so why should you stand up and say something? And I think that's a trap that we always let ourselves fall into, especially because it's an opinion that doesn't get ignored by other people. It's like, oh, you know, you're not going to say anything because why would you say anything?
Yeah, I think it's really hard. I think I know I've been guilty of that as well. You know, my son has been coming to MEPAKAN for a long time, and we have encountered some behavior that was just kind of a little iffy, and it's kind of like, well, that's just so and so. But I think if we really think about it, most of the games in which we play, most, not all, we're the hero, right? We're the one who stands up to a fire-breathing dragon and slays it. And so why can't we adopt some of that in our own lives and really confront that dragon that is racism or sexism? And you know, I think like Eric says, you know, you do have to kind of read the room. In some cases it might be appropriate to pull them aside. Like if you're the GM, take a little break and pull that character aside or that player aside. If you're not the player, encourage it, or not the GM, you could encourage the GM to do things like have a lines and veils document for the table, or use the red card system, and then say, hey, that's a red card for me, and confront it. And yes, it stops the play, but you know, it's kind of important. And if you're thinking it, probably others are thinking it too, and they're just, you know, they're just not they don't have as many points in bravery as you do or something, and you should be able to stand up and say, hey, look, that's not right with me. It's hard, it's incredibly hard, but it's something that we have to train ourselves to do.
Yeah, and you know, I can speak for MEPAKAN that, you know, anyone who stands up to any kind of discrimination is going to have full staff support. You know, we certainly have your back, and we have dealt with some of those types of issues in the past, and we have stood together and supported the person who was discriminated against by another attendee, and made sure that that did not happen to that person again. And, you know, so we, and Gavin mentioned it earlier, we're very visible. We're all over. You know, we are constantly circulating. That's one of my big things, is I'm always out on the floor. But, you know, we have sometimes 60 games going on at once, and we're not everywhere as much as, you know, we don't have 60 staff members, so we certainly don't have a staff member in every game. So don't be afraid to say something or to get a staff member if you feel uncomfortable. And even if it's not during the game, even if you get through the game and you say, okay, well, that's over, if you let us know, then we can at least be on the lookout for similar behavior, or give the next GM a heads up, hey, can you watch out for this and flag us down if we need to help you out. You know, we're definitely here to support everyone, and we want everyone to feel comfortable. You know, we certainly don't want anyone to walk away from a game or walk away from a convention going, well, that was terrible. That's definitely not what we're here for any reason, you know, not just discrimination, but for any reason. So.
Yeah, and I think we would all say that we're there to be responsible and stand up. So even if if I was not one of the directors, I would be like, oh, well, that was terrible. Let me forget it and go on. I'm going to go get a snack. You know, we're happy to delve into it, find out what's going on. And like Katie said, you know, give heads ups to people or whatever's appropriate.
Yeah, whatever's appropriate for the situation. Absolutely. And I have to say, you know, having most of the directing team here, and I give major props to Ed, who's our founder, because this was his baby, and we've only had it for a couple of years, and I'm very grateful that we had such a great framework to start with. And I said it in our last stream that everybody mentions that MEPAKAN is a family, and Gavin said it without even knowing that I had said that, you know. But we do feel very much like a family, and I'm grateful that we were able to take that from Ed and carry that on, and we'll continue to carry it on through COVID, through the virtual environment, and hopefully out on the other side. And so my last question, when we talk about coming out the other side, obviously pandemic aside, do you think, Gavin, that we can become, for example, like a post-racial society? What would that look like, where it doesn't matter, truly doesn't matter, the color of your skin, not just lip service?
Yeah, that's the toughest question you've asked so far. I'm a really big optimist. I'm always hopeful. I like to think I'm mostly positive. And I guess I'd answer that question in a way that we won't become post-racial, because unless we really fundamentally change what it is, and we had this conversation at the beginning of the hour, if our concept of race, that we're all kind of one human race and with different shades and ethnicities, that's different. But a post-racial place where we don't see any difference, I don't know if that is where we'll ever be, or if that's the right place. I mean, it's, I rather think of us celebrating our diversity and celebrating that, I don't know, say Trisha likes strawberry ice cream and I don't like strawberry ice cream. I like that somebody does like that. I like that there's different tastes and different perspectives, because to truly be all the same goes deeper, right? If we don't have any difference of perspective or creativity or any of those kind of things, it's going to be a really bland world. What I hope, though, is that we get to a spot where we have that difference and we celebrate it and we use it as one of our strengths rather than using it as a divide between us. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much, Gavin. We really appreciate your perspective, and I think this has been really great, and hopefully we can, take some of your advice and even continue to make MEPAKAN better and more welcoming, and really get the word out there that is the culture that we have. MEPAKAN's very close to my heart. We love it, and we want to keep doing the best we can to be the best for our MEPAKAN family. So thank you very much, Gavin.
Thank you, and happy gaming, everybody.
Good to see you, Gavin.
See you.
Thank you, Eric, for running all the background on the stream. He chimed in a little bit, but he's been doing all of our tech today and all day. So thank you very much to Eric, and thank you, Trish, for the questions.
Right, yeah.
Anyone doing the tech but me is like,
today, so it's better than the last time.
Yep.
So thank you very much, and we'll be back at 6 o'clock talking about live action role playing with Carcosa Creations.
Great.
So,
thanks, everybody.
Thank you.